Welcome to the 2021 Wilmington Spring Workshop.
We just wanted to take an opportunity here during this meeting to go over our backup documentation. I think as anybody can attest to that's had to conduct service backup for Charleston or Moorhead, it's always a challenge. With all of Matt's new tools and procedures that we've incorporated over the last few years and constant tweaks, our methodologies are almost constantly in a state of flux. And a lot of that applies to our neighboring offices too. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of constantly changing information that we're trying to keep up with. As everybody that's participated in backup knows, if you come across some inaccurate documentation or outdated documentation, it derails the whole process. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. One of the challenges with service backup documentation is that large parts of it are maintained by our neighbors, and we have no control over that. So when their procedures change, we rely upon them to update their documentation, and we hope that that happens. And in most cases it does, but in some cases it doesn't, and we have to touch base with them. But in the spirit of that, we decided to sort of reorganize our service backup documentation on the Google site. And this screen capture shows what the backup page looked like up until yesterday. After some changes to reorganize, this is what the new backup page looks like. In general, the objective was just to better organize the information. So when you, as a forecaster, are going through the process, whether you're backing up Charleston or Moorhead, if you're looking for quick references for, issuing their climate, you can find it in the same place on the page relative to the other offices. We're just looking for ways to make it more organized and more user friendly to get the information that you need. So this is what the presentation style that I came up with. Doesn't mean that it has to be this way forever, but I'd appreciate your feedback on whether you think it's an improvement, whether you think it still needs to be enhanced, or whatever the case may be. But pulling out the left-hand column from the old page, which showed the process we'll go through when we are requesting backup, it's still the left-hand page on the new Google document, or the new Google page. So you can see the header is ILM needs backup. So what I've done is maintained the information that you see, and in some cases expanded it on the right. So for example, when we need to go into backup, what do we need to do? Just in a nutshell, that information is still there. When we come back into service, what do we need to do? That information is still there. And then for information for our backup offices, that's relevant for our products and our CWA, that's been expanded upon. And you can see I've got sections for product quick references, our event criteria, important contact phone numbers, our SDMs, and then just sort of a catch-all at the bottom for additional resources. Now, this left-hand column is not something that we are going to use all that much. That's not going to come into play for us beyond the first couple of items. However, when we back up Charleston, this information is what we're going to be looking to more frequently. So again, on the left-hand side of this slide is the old backup page, and on the right-hand side is how the information is presented on the new page. So this section that's highlighted now is probably 90% maintained by Charleston. So these links, for example, to TWL instructions or fire weather, these links will take you to documentation on the Charleston Google site page that's maintained by Charleston. And same with event criteria, same with their phone numbers. They'll keep this information up to date, or at least we hope that they do. As far as our local methodologies, what our forecasters need to do when they sit at the forecast desk and need to go into backup mode, whether it's short fuse or long fuse, that information is right at the top. And then I've migrated these forecast aids just down into the resources section of the column, have a link to the intranet, other information that they've provided. For example, their IDSS, they have an IDSS page on their Google site. And you can see on the left, we have individual links to Rip Threat Calculator, OBS Monitor, OBS Plot, other local apps that we use on our system in support of Charleston. So I've just combined those into one Google Doc, and I've named it Local Apps for Charleston Backup. So that's where that information has been condensed. And then links to their station duty manual. That's still in place. And that's really it. The same, I could have made a slide that looked almost identical for Morehead City, but it's the same thing. Format on our new page is the exact same for Morehead City as it is for Charleston. The biggest differences are going to be in the product quick reference section. I mean, each of those is going to have a link to their climate procedures or their marine surf zone forecasts or fire weather, whatever the case may be. And for the most part, every product that we need to issue for them, the documentation has been made available and we link directly to it. So hopefully another effort in this was to get rid of the PDFs as much as possible. And I'm sure there's still some embedded in there somewhere, but in terms of keeping it up to date, PDFs make it just that much more difficult. So the documentation has been migrated for the most part into individual Google documents. It certainly makes updating it much easier. And I know after every backup event that we go through, it's really helpful when you guys take notes. And if you run into issues where documentation is not accurate or needs to be updated, you know, you've been really good about passing that information on to me or to Matt, and then we take care of the updates. But what I'd like us to get into the habit of doing is, if it's, you know, just a relatively minor tweak or adjustment that needs to be made, it would be super helpful just to be able to go into the document yourself and make the adjustment. You know, not anticipating having to revamp a whole set of documentation, but if there's minor changes along the way that you've noticed during your particular backup session, I'd like to see everybody be able to go into these documents and help maintain and keep things up to date for those documents that we're responsible for. And I may have to go through the sharing permissions just to make sure that the people that are going to be doing that have permissions to actually make edits to those, so that that'll get ironed out over the next days and weeks. But and one thing I considered adding, and I think may be a good idea to these pages, and I'll use Jordan for an example. When he worked, I think the last backup event, or the last two maybe, he keeps a Google Doc, and he writes down the issues as they come up, and then he shares that with me, and then you know, I use what he's documented to update things. But I think maybe it might help if I link to like a master document on each of these, or on this page, maybe titled, you know, backup issues or whatever. And then as you go through the process, or at the end of the process, if you've run into problems or noted issues with the documentation or whatever the case may be, just have you guys be able to go into one document, edit, take notes, add notes, and then we can just have like a running issues list, and then we can maintain off of that. So that's really all I've got. It's not anything revolutionary here. It's just kind of a makeover in presentation more than content itself. But does anybody have any thoughts or questions or anything else they want to bring up?
Carl, this is Reed. I was looking at it online. Looks great. I noticed when you go into Charleston needs backup and you click on the short fused, there's no mention of the ADM ERH being issued, but in the long fused it does say that. I was wondering if you could just put that at the top box on the front page, like ILM needs backup. And
yeah, I can do that. And
yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about it because we so rarely are called for backup. And short fused is when maybe their radar takes a lightning hit or something like that, and they can't, I don't know, their ellipse goes down during the severe weather, and they call us to issue warnings for them.
yeah.
So we still need to issue the ADM in those circumstances, correct? Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure that information gets up there too. Anything else? And if you have any thoughts on this, by the way, as you go through the process and you interact with it more, just pass them along. And the whole point of this is to make it as user friendly as possible, and you guys are the users, so your feedback is much appreciated.
Thanks, Carl, for doing this. I just played with the website a little bit and it looks great. And I clicked on a couple of the things that have come up over the last few times we've backed Charleston up with the climate products and fire weather, and the new Google pages, the docs that those link to look great. And I really like your idea of doing the running document with issues that come up like you suggested too. But nice work with this.
Okay, thanks. Any questions, just send me an email.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention something real quick, Carl. Whenever you search in the search box, which is what I did the first time I did the service backup, obviously not ideal since we have a dedicated tab to this. I was just in a rush, I guess, but whenever you do that, you get an old checklist. I was wondering if we could get rid of the old PDFs that were on there. If you do the Google search box on the Google Sites page.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of house cleaning that needs to take place.
Okay.
I was hesitant. I mean, I want to be careful and not delete something that
right,
that we missed, so it doesn't get migrated. But yeah, that's something I'll focus on the next week or so. But I think we're good with probably being able to delete all those PDFs at this point.
Yeah, I might have been the only one that Googled it whenever this started happening, but yeah, just a PSA, I guess. Use the use the tab at the top of the Google Sites page. I know it's a no-brainer, but
yeah. And if you do stumble upon anything like that down the road, certainly let me know and we'll clean that stuff out.
Jordan, I agree that search feature is amazing. And Carl, what we could do is if you see a document like that, Jordan or anybody, you could just download it we could keep a folder like old something and just keep it for a little while just in case, so we don't get rid of something we need on our network or somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right, I think we're going to keep plugging along.
Hey, actually, Mark, this is Terry.
Yeah.
I couldn't get unmuted. I have one more thing for the backup stuff.
Sure.
If you go, like, when that first slide that Carl showed where it was like ILM needs backup, if you call Charleston and they say that they can't back us up, it's their responsibility to call Morehead City. Right? Rick Kreitner and I got in trouble with that when Charleston had called us up and asked for backup when we were in severe weather. And we said, can you call Columbia? And they were kind of miffed by that. And then the next day we got an email from the MIC basically telling us that we cannot say no. We have to then call Columbia for backup for Charleston. Maybe that's changed, but I know that was a couple of years ago, so that could be different. But I just know that we got in trouble for that.
Yeah, I think that's still the case, Terry. If you're calling for backup, you obviously, and unless it's a scheduled type thing, in which case that wouldn't be an issue. But if you're calling for backup, it's because you're having problems, and the intent is not to have you calling around and making multiple attempts to different offices to get some help. So if you call Charleston, they can't do it, they need to make the next call.